welcome to the Deep Dive. Today you're joining us as we unearth, well, a really compelling chapter from history, kind of forgotten tale that might just reshape how you think about ancient Egypt.
That's right. Forget the usual images, the pyramids up north, just for a moment. We're heading south, deep into Upper Egypt, right when let's say, the traditional pharaoh's power was starting to fade.
And stepping into that picture, this formidable new power from the South Nubia, right? Also known as Kush.
Kush. Picture a land, like brimming with gold, a really strong warrior tradition, and, their own line of pretty impressive kings. These rulers, they came from Kush, which is in the broader region we call Nubia.
And it's from Kush that this really remarkable figure steps out. Pi, we're talking around 747 BCE, a pivotal time.
Hugely pivotal. And, the amazing thing isn't just that he led an army north into Egypt. That happened, sure.
That's how he arrived, isn't it? And the seismic shift that came after. Pi didn't just sweep through like a typical conqueror, leaving chaos behind.
No, not at all. He positioned himself very strategically, and ultimately he took the throne of Egypt. But not as some foreign occupier. He took it as pharaoh.
As pharaoh. And here's where it gets really interesting for me. Pi was an African king from Kush. An outsider, you might say, by the Egyptian standards at that time.
Right. And this really marks the start of what historians call the 25th dynasty of Egypt. You sometimes hear them called the Black Pharaohs.
The whole dynasty. So not just Pi.
Oh, no. You've got his successors, too, figures like Shabaka, the really ambitious Taharka, and then Tanutamani. This wasn't just a quick blip.
And they weren't just sitting on the throne either, were they? They were actively involved.
Deeply involved. They engaged with Egyptian culture, revitalized it even.
Ooh.
We see them rebuilding temples, ones that had fallen into ruin.
Really? So like restoration projects.
Big time. And reviving older Egyptian religious practices, artistic styles too. They were consciously trying to restore order and stability.
Which tells you a lot about their approach, doesn't it? It shows they had this deep connection, or at least wanted to project one, to Egypt's traditions. It feels like a way to legitimize their rule within that existing framework.
Exactly. It's a crucial insight into their political strategy, you could say.
Okay, so this powerful dynasty clearly making a huge mark, which leads us to this central puzzle. And it's kind of baffling, honestly. Why are they so relatively unknown today in, the popular version of history?
It is baffling. This isn't some minor footnote, right? It's a significant chunk of Egyptian history that seems to have been, deliberately downplayed, maybe even overlooked.
Yeah, overlooked feels too gentle sometimes.
Right. And there's a really compelling argument based on the sources we've looked at that points towards something more deliberate, a downplaying, maybe even an erasure.
Erasure, wow. And the why behind that?
Well, according to these sources, it seems rooted in, let's say, a discomfort, particularly among later European historians, a discomfort with the very idea that Black Africans held such a powerful central position in ancient Egypt's story.
Okay, that's a heavy implication. And the how? How could that even happen? Are we talking about active destruction?
The sources suggest it's complicated. There's talk of active measures, things like statues being damaged, inscriptions may be defaced, even the possibility of, historical texts being suppressed, maybe lost or destroyed over time.
But beyond actual physical damage, there's also how the story gets told, right? In academic circles.
Absolutely. The idea that maybe archaeological evidence found later was kind of sidelined, put away in museum archives, perhaps not given the weight it deserved. And, this whole period just gets glossed over in textbooks, the ones most of us grew up with.
So the core idea here, and it's a big one, is that Africa wasn't just next to Egypt, influencing it. For a pretty long time, Africa actually ruled Egypt.
That's the assertion, a powerful one to grapple with.
Now, I can imagine some listeners thinking, okay, but weren't they foreigners? Outsiders coming in?
And that's a really common first reaction, but it kind of misses the bigger picture, doesn't it? Our sources really emphasize that this view ignores centuries, literally centuries, of deep cultural ties, religious links, trade, even family connections between Nubia and Egypt long before Pi.
So it's not like they just showed up out of nowhere.
Not at all. You could argue they saw themselves as legitimate claimants to that sacred authority of the pharaohs. They were deeply woven into the whole Nile Valley civilization fabric.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
And to really hammer home the power and sophistication of Nubia back then.
Oh.
Tell us about the pyramids.
Yes. This is amazing. In Sudan today, right, where Kush was centered, the landscape is still dotted with pyramids built by these same Nubian rulers.
Okay, pyramids in Sudan. I think I knew that.
But here's the kicker. There are twice as many pyramids still standing in Sudan today as there are in all of Egypt.
Wait, what? Twice as many?
Twice as many. It just completely blows away any idea that they were some minor fringe power, doesn't it? It shows the scale, the advancement of their civilization.
Wow, okay, that really does put things in a different light. Twice as many pyramids. And that massive scale just makes the historical amnesia even weirder.
It does. And this leads us to a really key moment in, well, maybe not rediscovery, but the initial rejection of this history. Back in the 19th century, 1844 specifically, European archaeologists, they found something incredible.
What did they find?
They actually unearthed the tomb of one of these Black Pharaohs.
A pharaoh's tomb from this dynasty. In 1844, that should have been huge news.
I don't think so. Imagine the potential,
Yes,
right,
Sam.
to totally rewrite our understanding. But what happened next is kind of a stark lesson in how preconceived ideas can just blind you, even when the evidence is right there.
So what? They found the tomb, but...
Despite all the clear signs inside, the art style, the royal inscriptions, everything pointing squarely at a powerful black ruler, the archaeologists, by and large, they just dismissed it.
Dismissed it. How? Why?
There's this really chilling quote attributed to one of them, something like, "These people could not have ruled Egypt."
Could not have. Wow.
Yeah. Just think about that. It wasn't based on a lack of evidence. It was pure worldview.
Yeah.
A set of assumptions that just had no room for the reality of Black African pharaohs.
But why? Why such a strong refusal? What were the underlying beliefs stopping them?
Well, the consequence was this vital evidence just got pushed aside, silenced, really. It was basically shuffled off into the shadows of academia, and that definitely contributed to why the 25th dynasty is still relatively obscure in the mainstream narrative today.
And this history isn't just locked away in dusty archives, is it?
Not at all. The descendants of these Nubian people, they still live in Sudan today. They carry this rich heritage in vibrant oral traditions.
Passed down through generations.
Exactly. And you see it across that landscape marked by those pyramids, the ones people don't visit as often, and within historical sites that, frankly, haven't always gotten the attention they deserve from, mainstream history.
It really speaks to how history endures, even when people try to bury it.
It does. There's a powerful line from one of our sources, something like, "You can bury a body, you can burn a book, but you can't kill a truth that's ready to rise."
That's powerful. A good reminder to always question the stories we're told, isn't it? And to actively look for those less told ones.
Definitely.
So, as we kind of pause here for a moment in this deep dive, it's worth really thinking about that, isn't it? The power of who tells the story. How narrative shapes what we think we know about the past. And how bias, even unconscious bias, can just completely warp historical understanding.
Absolutely. The story of the Black Pharaohs really forces us to ask those questions, to question what we think we know and just stay open to maybe rewriting our understanding of history.
Yeah. So thinking about what we've covered so far, what part of this story is really sticking with you? Is it the sheer scale of Nubian power? The pure...
Or maybe the evidence suggesting that deliberate historical silencing, that, quote, "these people could not have ruled Egypt," is pretty chilling. Or perhaps just the resilience, the fact that the history did survive despite it all.
For me, I think it's that stark contrast. You have this historical reality, a powerful African dynasty ruling Egypt, and then this relative silence about it in popular history. It really makes me wonder, what else is out there? What other major stories are just waiting to be properly told?
It certainly does spark that curiosity, doesn't it? And maybe on that note, this is a good moment to just take a quick breather. We've gone through quite a bit: Pi's rise, the dynasty's impact, those early archaeological finds, and the reluctance to accept them.
Yeah, definitely. So let's take a short break. When we come back, we can dig a bit deeper into maybe some of the longer-term reasons for this historical silencing and really explore why this forgotten tale still matters so much today.
Sounds good. Stick with us, everyone, because there is definitely more to uncover here. Maybe take a second to jot down any questions or thoughts you've had so far. We'll be right back.
And we're back on the deep dive. Just before the break, we were deep into the incredible story of the Black Pharaohs of Egypt's 25th dynasty, and looking at the pretty compelling evidence that suggests their legacy was, well, significantly obscured, perhaps deliberately.
Right. And it's really important, I think, to place that alleged erasure within a broader historical context. You have to think about things like the rise of European colonialism, the development of racial ideologies in the centuries after the 25th dynasty. Those factors likely played a huge role in how this period of Egyptian history got interpreted, or maybe misinterpreted, or just plain ignored.
Okay, let's unpack that a bit. Are you saying that as European powers were expanding, there was almost a need to create a specific version of history, one that kind of justified their own dominance?
That seems to be a strong argument, yes. The dominant narrative that often emerged back then really emphasized the supposed superiority of European civilization. And, well, either implicitly or explicitly, it downplayed the contributions or significance of other cultures, especially those in Africa.
So having a widely known story where Black Africans were central figures, powerful rulers in ancient Egypt, that would have clashed pretty hard with that framework.
It would have directly challenged it, acknowledging the Black Pharaohs, their power, their legitimacy, their cultural achievements. It would have fundamentally undermined the racial hierarchies that were being constructed and used, unfortunately, to justify things like colonial expansion and exploitation.
So it might not have just been an accident of history, like losing some text over time. It could have been more about omission, maybe reinterpretation, to fit a particular worldview.
That's the uncomfortable possibility we have to confront, isn't it? By minimizing or maybe even ignoring the period of Nubian rule, historians of that later colonial era could maintain a narrative of a, let's say, more racially pure or white ancient Egypt. And that narrative, tragically, helped prop up some deeply flawed and harmful racial theories.
And going back to the methods, the damaged statues, the possibly suppressed texts, maybe those weren't necessarily part of some ancient plot to erase history then, but more about how later scholars interpreted or didn't interpret what they found, like a lack of focus, or maybe even that unconscious bias we talked about.
That's a really important distinction, yes. While you might have had specific monuments destroyed in ancient times for various reasons, political shifts, religious changes, whatever the more systematic erasure we're discussing probably happened later. Through selective interpretation, how evidence was presented, what was prioritized by scholars.
So they weren't necessarily out there smashing things themselves in the 18th or 19th centuries?
Probably not actively destroying artifacts en masse, no. It's more likely a failure to give the evidence the right context, the right significance within the bigger picture of ancient Egypt. The evidence was often there, like that tomb they found in 1844. But the lens they were viewing history through just couldn't fully process or accept what it meant.
It's like that pre-existing belief system acted as a really strong filter, just blocking the full truth from getting out, getting acknowledged, becoming part of the main story. That quote again, these people could not have ruled Egypt. It just lays bare that bias trumping the actual evidence.
It really does. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it, how many other important stories from different cultures, different times, might have been similarly overlooked or pushed aside, all because of the biases and assumptions of the people who traditionally got to write the history books.
That's probably one of the biggest takeaways from this whole deep dive for me. It just hammers home why we always need to critically look at historical narratives, to constantly challenge assumptions. History isn't just some fixed set of facts set in stone.
No, it's an ongoing process. Discovery, interpretation, reevaluation, always evolving.
And the fact that the descendants of the Nubians still carry these stories today, in their own cultural memory, even if it wasn't in the mainstream textbooks, that says so much about the power of cultural heritage, doesn't it? The resilience of truth.
It really does. Oral traditions, those archaeological sites that maybe don't get the big tour groups, they offer these crucial alternative ways to understand the past. Sometimes they bypass the filters of those dominant narratives.
Like those pyramids in Sudan you mentioned. They're just standing there. Silent, maybe, but incredibly powerful proof of the might and legacy of these Nubian rulers. A very visual reminder of a history that really deserves to be known.
Yeah. So as we sort of wrap up this part of the discussion, I'm really struck by that intersection, the evidence, the erasure, and the endurance in this story.
The evidence is undeniable. The signs of erasure are compelling. And the survival of the story is remarkable.
Exactly. It's a powerful case study, not just about what we know about history, but how that history gets constructed, and maybe who gets to control the narrative.
It definitely leaves you thinking about how much more of the past might still be out there, waiting to be looked at with fresh eyes, understood in a more complete way.
Absolutely. This deep dive into the Black Pharaohs is just such a pertinent reminder. The stories we inherit, they aren't always complete. They aren't always unbiased. And actively seeking out these forgotten tales can lead to some truly transformative insights about our shared human past.
Okay, let's bring it back to you, our listener, one more time. What aspect of this deep dive into the story of the Black Pharaohs has resonated with you the most? Was it the sheer scope of their power? Maybe those pyramids in Sudan?
Or perhaps the evidence suggesting that deliberate historical erasure, that quote. Or maybe just the resilience, the way the story survived against the odds. Take a moment. Think about what really stood out for you.
And what new questions does this raise for you? What specific part of this history are you now curious about? Maybe more on the cultural exchange between Nubia and Egypt, or the specific archaeology.
We genuinely want to hear from you. Please head down to the comments section. Share what surprised you, what made you think. What are you still pondering? Your questions, your insights, they honestly help guide where we go next with these deep dives. We really do value your curiosity and engagement.
Yeah, definitely. And hey, if you have any theories yourself about why this history was sort of buried for so long, we'd love to hear them. It's through this kind of back and forth, this questioning and sharing, that we can all work towards a fuller picture of the past. So don't be shy.
Please jump into those comments. Like this deep dive if you found it eye-opening. We certainly did. Subscribe to the deep dive if you haven't yet so you don't miss out on more stories like this, the ones that often get left out.
And please, seriously, take a moment to tell someone about the deep dive. A friend, your family, a teacher, share it on social media. Help us get these important, sometimes silenced, stories out there. Let's broaden our collective understanding together. Oh, and maybe take some notes if something really sparked your interest. You'll want to remember this. Listen to the whole story again. Maybe there's always more than meets the eye.
So, next time, we are heading into territory that sounds, well, even more enigmatic, maybe even unbelievable. The title we're playing with is The Samurai Who Became a Viking, History's Most Mysterious Warrior.
Whoa, okay. A samurai Viking. Seriously.
Was he real? Or is it just an amazing legend? What kind of journey would that even involve back then? And could one person like that actually change anything? It really pushes the boundaries of what we think we know about ancient connections.
That sounds absolutely wild. Definitely don't want to miss that one. Make sure you tune in for that deep dive.
Until then, keep that curiosity going.
Yeah, keep it burning brightly.
Yeah.
Remember, history isn't always just what they teach you in school or the headlines you read. It's often hiding. In the shadows, the silences, the stories that haven't had their proper voice yet. Keep digging, keep asking questions, keep exploring.
Stay inquisitive, everyone.
This has been The Deep Dive.